Greetings. As always, thank you, Dorcas, and all your colleagues for organizing this great open university. I call it an open university. In Kiswahili, chuo kikuu. That's what university is. And Brother Reginald, thank you for those kind and wonderful words. So greetings, sisters and brothers, comrades, friends, from wherever you're joining in today. First of all, I think our president, Bobi Wine, has proven to the world who the legitimate president of Uganda is. The recent national tour, the mobilization rallies, where we saw hundreds of thousands of people showing up, that demonstrated to everybody who the legitimate president of Uganda was, and the illegitimate dictator, General, I like to call him Field Marshal now, Field Marshal Museveni, saw for himself who is the true power in Uganda. And that is the people of Uganda, people power. They showed up in massive numbers. And the good thing is that all the diplomats accredited and based in Uganda saw it. The whole world saw it. So that argument does not exist. It never existed, but it's emphatically now been cleared. Museveni has been reduced to an ordinary citizen of Uganda, watching the entire population virtually come out to show whom they support in Uganda. So I wanted to start off with those words, first of all. It's clear by the massive numbers that Dictator Museveni will go either by stepping down or by being driven out. The choice is his. The people of Uganda have made their choice by coming out to demonstrate their support for the legitimate president, Bobi Wine. The good thing is also the members of the security forces saw it as well. The soldiers saw it. The police force saw it as well. So I urge them all to be and stand with the people of Uganda and never, ever kill innocent Ugandans. Do not listen to illegitimate orders by an illegitimate ruler of Uganda. So now I wanted to broaden today's conversation. And because I have another engagement at 9:40, I will try to speak to for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, maybe even less, so we can have more time for an exchange and a dialogue. I posted some hashtags on the chat, and I hope we start to use those hashtags as we go forward. And I'll explain the importance of that in the course of my presentation. I want to talk about Uganda's liberation in the context of a Pan-African agenda. We cannot afford, and we would be making a big mistake by seeing Uganda as isolated from the demands of the people of Africa, particularly the young people of Africa. We see what is going on right now in West Africa. It affects not only West Africa, it affects the entire African continent, and it affects the relationship between Africa and the rest of the world. We saw the most recent coup in Gabon. But the one before that, which was actually much more important and transformative, was the one in Niger. Now in Niger, one can say that the coup d'etat may have been originated from a personal struggle between the leader of the Presidential Guard, which is General Chiani, who is the person in charge now in terms of removing President Mohamed Bazoum from power. It might have started off as a personal quarrel or argument between the two of them. It might not have been a progressive coup. It might not have been in support of the aspirations of the people of Niger. But once he seized power, it became clear that he had no choice. The young people of Niger came out to the streets. And their number one demand was to end the exploitative relationship between Niger and France. The conversation was no longer about the coup itself, but it was about the exploitation that has impoverished Niger, because Niger has a neo-colonial relationship similar to what the other West African countries have with the former colonial power, France, but also similar to the relationship that Uganda has with its former colonial power and the rest of the industrialized world, which is that we sell our valuable resources for cheap, and we import manufactured products at a very high cost. And that is why progressively, every year, our people become much more impoverished. Now, there's some information on social media that Niger was getting 80 cents a pound for its uranium, and the world market price was about $215 a pound. I've done research, and perhaps that number is exaggerated. It may not be true or accurate. Nevertheless, Niger was being massively exploited. I think the more reliable information comes from the former Minister of Energy in Niger, who said in one given year, a few years ago, Niger exported $3.8 billion worth of uranium. And Niger, out of that $3.8 billion, got only $490 million. That's outrageous. That's a scandal. That's only 16% of the value of the uranium exported. Now, what is happening with the difference? Of course, it is accruing to France, the former colonial power. Niger is subsidizing the standard of high living in France and other European countries because it also exports to other EU countries at the expense of progressively every year impoverishing the people of Niger. So when this coup occurred, France, of course, demanded the restoration of President Bazoum. France, speaking through ECOWAS, because we know who's really controlling ECOWAS in the background, gave the new military rulers 1 week to restore power to Bazoum. That 1 week has, of course, now passed. It's become more than 2 months. And why did the invasion of Niger not occur by ECOWAS on behalf of France? Because the people came out on the streets in massive numbers in Niger, tens of thousands. But even much more importantly, young people came out on the streets in other countries, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and in Guinea and Senegal and other countries. And on social media, young people from all over Africa were coming out to condemn any possible invasion of Niger by ECOWAS on behalf of France. And much more significantly, Burkina Faso and Mali both said that they would consider an invasion of Niger an invasion of their countries, and they would also come to militarily support another African country. Now, this is very interesting what we're seeing. In the past, we have not seen this type of solidarity amongst African countries. And all this is being driven by the young people in all these countries. The young people are saying, enough is enough. We are not going to allow this colonial, neo-colonial economic exploitation to continue. So that is the setting. The same kind of push is going on in other parts of Africa, including East Africa, including Kenya, where we have seen young people also come out in massive numbers. They're protesting the levels of poverty. Why is the cost of fuel so high? Why is the cost of food so high? We saw them coming out in massive numbers, by and large, peaceful, but showing strength in their massive numbers. So now let's come to Uganda. We saw the outpouring, massive outpouring of support for the recent mobilization rally by the legitimate president of Uganda, President Robert Kyagulanyi, AKA Bobby Wine. And in Uganda, in addition to protesting the high cost of living, the high cost of fuel, the high cost of food, they are also protesting the 37 years of a regime of torture, a regime of corruption, a regime of terror, a regime of murder, and a legitimate regime, because they know who won the elections in 2021. And that is why they came out in massive numbers. Now, this demonstrates that a few things could happen in Uganda going forward. And obviously, much of it depends on how the dictator himself conducts himself. Will he come out and try to block further mobilization, as he's already demonstrated, by banning any further mobilization rallies? That is a question that will have to be addressed. He's already shown that he cannot stop the people from demonstrating their support for the legitimate president. And the whole world saw it. So the whole world is going to be watching very carefully how he behaves as the national mobilization rallies continues when the legitimate president returns to Uganda. As many of you know, of course, he has traveled. He's attending the Ugandan Diaspora Conference in Canada. And after Canada, he's going to come to the United States. He will be in Washington, D.C. next week, where he will be able to engage with members of the Congressional Black Caucus who are meeting in Washington next week. He'll be able to speak to many members of Congress and inform them on the situation in Uganda, and also to press them to stop any further aid to this illegitimate regime in Uganda. Now, let me address some recent successes that we've had. In the last appearance, I urged comrades to be involved on social media. I gave a number of hashtags. I particularly encourage people to protest against the World Bank and the continued support for the illegitimate regime in Uganda. First of all, I want to congratulate and thank everybody who did join in those protests. Those protests have now been successful, as you know. The World Bank has suspended any new funding for the illegitimate ruler in Uganda. And even though the official press statement might make reference to the anti-LGBTQI legislation signed into law by dictator Museveni, it was a combination of all those factors. I would compare to one of my big heroes was Muhammad Ali, actually. Muhammad Ali, of course, was a great boxer, but he was also a social activist and human rights activist. I remember one of his best fights was the one against George Foreman, who was knocking everybody, left and right. And Ali was a bit older at that time. And people said, Ali, are you crazy? Why are you fighting this great, powerful George Foreman? That was before many of you were born in Congo, in Kinshasa, in 1974. Ali softened up Foreman for 7 rounds. And then in the 8th round, with one blow to the head, took him out. I see the same thing as the way we finally got the World Bank to stop supporting the illegitimate dictator in Uganda by giving him billions of dollars over the last few years. Our protests on the streets, our protests on social media, all combined with the anti-LGBTQ law, which was signed. By that time, we had already softened the World Bank, and the World Bank was ready to back out. And in the last appearance when I was here, I told you I knew we were putting enough pressure on the World Bank because they were contacting us and urging us to stop the protest that we were conducting outside their headquarters in Washington, D.C., of the World Bank and the IMF. So that, to me, demonstrates the power of protest, physical as well as social media. So you should take great hope in that and become much more inspired and motivated in continuing this type of protest, because now we need to turn our attention to the $1 billion that the United States still supports the illegitimate regime in Uganda with. That's number one. Number two, we need to dedicate ourselves and commit ourselves even much more determined way in fighting to stop EACOP, in ensuring that Total Energies does not continue that pipeline, which outcome would be only to empower the illegitimate regime in Uganda and to give dictator Museveni more resources with which to continue torturing and murdering the people of Uganda. And that is why I posted some of the hashtags that you see on the chat. I might add a few more and encourage you, fellow Ugandans, to come up with additional hashtags as well. We must be very encouraged by the turnout in the rallies for mobilization, but let's not become comfortable. Let's not become comfortable in saying yes, because we saw our brothers and sisters turn out in their tens and thousands. It means that the hard work is done. No, we all know that once a very vicious beast is cornered, that is when the beast becomes even much more violent. So we should expect that we are going to have many more, unfortunately, possibly bloody days as we come toward the liberation of Uganda. But one thing is certain, Museveni will go. He will go by being forced to step down, or he will be driven out. The people who risked their lives, who defied the regime and showed up in massive numbers during the recent rally, it's clear to me that now they're ready to go all the way. If they're ready to go all the way, we in diaspora cannot become comfortable. We must join them and maximize our own efforts toward the liberation of the people of Uganda. And let me now conclude on one note, why I said we have to have a Pan-African agenda. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to drive Museveni out because we have a particular hate for Museveni. No, but we have a particular hate for what he has done to Uganda, how he has destroyed Uganda. And in order for us to recover Uganda, we need to change our relationship with the outside world. We have to be able to get the proper, correct, and fair price for the products that we sell to the outside world. And I assure you, sisters and brothers, we cannot do it individually. We need to have a collective African approach. Thomas Sankara demonstrated to us in 1987 that one leader, no matter what type of good policies you have, an agenda, if you operate alone, they will not allow you to succeed. In fact, Thomas Sankara predicted his own demise at the Organization of African Unity meeting before the AU. It was still the OAU in Addis Ababa in 1987 in July. He said, brothers and sisters, fellow presidents, let's have a common front when we try to change our economic relationship with the West. If Burkina Faso goes alone, I will not be alive to attend next year's meeting. 3 months later, he was eliminated by the agents of neo-colonialism and imperialism. So Uganda has all the resources. Kenya has all the resources. Tanzania has all the resources. We have to have a common front. Even if initially we come together as East Africans, West Africans come together as West Africans, people in South Africa do the same thing, the ultimate outcome and solution must be a Pan-African United States of Africa. And if we are able to do that, sisters and brothers, within 15 years, we will be able to economically transform Africa. We will be able to use all our resources to industrialize and become a global power. We should no longer accept to be second-class citizens of the world. The young people of West Africa are demonstrating that. They are no longer willing to be second-class citizens of the world. And that is why you are seeing the transformations ongoing in West Africa. In East Africa, we must embrace the same mentality. Not only should we end dictatorship, but we should also transform our relationship with the outside world. Sisters and brothers, thank you. Those are all the words I wanted to share with you today. I think I can stay for about 10 more minutes. And then, of course, I'll be able to join you again to continue our conversation in the future. Thank you to all of you.